The Great Play of the Laughing God. What is the Harlequins' true purpose? Opening the veil of enigma, the narrative begins. The voice is ancient, weary, yet sharp, with the clarity of one who has witnessed epochs turn to dust. To witness them is to witness a paradox given form. They are the memory of a joy that curdled into damnation, the laughter in a funeral dirge, the final exquisite jest at the heart of a dying universe. Do not seek to understand them. Seek only to survive their performance. Attributed to Inquisitor Chevak, Apocrypha of the Laughing God. The galaxy is dying. Let us not delude ourselves with myths of glory or the promise of a distant dawn. The 41st millennium is an age of endings. It is a vast, sprawling graveyard choked with the headstones of forgotten empires and the carrion of butchered gods. The Imperium of Man, a monolithic corpse crowned in gold, rots from within its billion worlds, groaning under the weight of dogma, ignorance, and a faith that mistakes suffering for piety. Its armies march to endless attritional wars across 1,000 fronts, their blood a meaningless lubricant for a machine that has forgotten its own purpose. Across the void, ancient races wither on the vine. The proud Eldari, scattered and haunted, cling to their nomadic craft worlds, their souls a flickering candle against the hurricane of a thirsting god born from their own sins. The Drukhari, their twisted kin, sustain their existence through the exquisite agony of others, a constant frantic debauchery to stave off the same spiritual decay. The Orcs wage their eternal mindless war, a green tide of violence that washes over star systems for the sheer brutal joy of the fight. The Toe Empire extends its fragile hand, offering a greater good that the galaxy is too steeped in hatred to ever accept. And from the cold, silent darkness between the stars, the Tyranid hive fleets descend, a singular, ravenous entity whose only purpose is to consume all, to strip every world of its life, and leave behind a barren rock, another silent monument in the cosmic cemetery. And then there is the great enemy, the primordial annihilator, Chaos. It is the psychic echo of all our failings, the cancerous tumor of emotion given sentient, malevolent form. It whispers from the warp, a realm of madness that underpins our own reality, promising power, offering liberation, and delivering only damnation. Its legions of twisted transhuman warriors and gibbering demons spill forth from the Eye of Terror, a permanent wound in the fabric of space, seeking to drag all of creation into their hellish domain. This is the state of the galaxy, a symphony of desperation, a chorus of screams, a slow, grinding decay of hope into the cold dust of nihilism. There are no heroes here, not in the stories we once told ourselves. There are only survivors, monsters, and the dead. And then there is the laughter. Against this backdrop of unrelenting grey and blood-red despair they appear. They do not march, they do not advance in regimented lines. They explode into reality, a flash of impossible colour against a canvas of grime and ruin. They are a cascade of diamonds and shards of stained glass thrown into a slaughterhouse. They are the Harlequins. To the terrified eyes of an Imperial Guardsman, they are demons of kaleidoscopic light, their movements a blur that defies the laws of physics. One moment they are 100 meters away, a flicker of motley. The next they are upon you, and your world ends in a kiss of monomolecular wire and a silent, mocking grin. To a Cornate berserker, they are an infuriating enigma, their grace and agility a mockery of his brute force. Their deaths delivered not with honest rage, but with the casual cruelty of a master artist. They are acrobats of murder, artists of atrocity. Their holosuits shimmer and distort, projecting images of fallen gods and glorious nightmares, turning the battlefield into a stage of pure psychological terror. Their masks, the Rylus, are frozen in expressions of mirth, sorrow, or rage, emotionless visages behind which an unknowable mind calculates the precise angle of a killing blow. They do not speak in commands but in riddles and verses from forgotten epics. The shriek of their cannons becomes a note in their dreadful music. The spray of an enemy's blood a splash of paint on their canvas. They are war made into theatre, and theatre made into war. But who are they? From what hidden realm do they emerge, and to what purpose do they fight? They are Eldari, that much is clear, yet they owe allegiance to no craft world, nor do they indulge in the sadistic pleasures of Comora. They walk freely between the splintered factions of their race, acting as emissaries, guides, and sometimes executioners. They appear without warning, fight for reasons known only to themselves, and vanish as quickly as they came, leaving behind only corpses and questions. Are they ghosts of a lost past, eternally reenacting the tragedy that shattered their empire? Are they the guardians of a forbidden knowledge, a truth so terrible or so powerful that it must be shielded from the galaxy at any cost? Or are they merely the ultimate nihilists, madmen, dancing on the precipice of annihilation, their laughter a final act of defiance against a universe that has already condemned them? This is the central enigma of the Harlequins. In an age defined by brutal, straightforward purpose to survive, to conquer, to corrupt, to consume, their motives remain utterly opaque. They fight with the passion of zealots and the precision of assassins, yet their grand strategy is invisible, their ultimate goal, a closely guarded secret. They move through the great game of galactic survival like the ultimate trickster, their every action a feint, their every word a misdirection. They are a question posed in the language of violence and grace. And to begin to understand the answer, we must first understand the tragedy that gave them their stage. For what or for whom do they truly fight? That is the play we seek to uncover. To comprehend the dance, one must first hear the music of the scream that preceded it. The purpose of the Harlequins is not rooted in a grand strategy conceived in the present, but in the ashes of a cataclysm that burned their past to the ground. Their every step is a resonance of that ancient, terrible agony. Their story and the story of their entire race begins not with a war, but with a paradise that chose to rot. There was a time long before humanity's brutish ascent when the Eldari were the undisputed masters of the galaxy. Their empire was a thing of sublime and terrible beauty. They had conquered the stars not through crude force, but through an elegance of technology and a mastery of the psychic arts that bordered on godhood. Their worlds were post-scarcity Edens, where crystalline towers pierced clouds of iridescent gas and starships like silvered leaves sailed the solar winds. They had defeated disease-defied aging and perfected art forms so complex they could shatter the sanity of a lesser mind. They were a people who had reached their own apotheosis, the final perfect expression of mortal potential. And in that perfection they found their damnation. What does a culture do when it has achieved everything? When every desire can be met, every sensation experienced, every challenge overcome? The Eldari were faced with the ultimate void, the ennui of infinity. Their long lives became not a gift, but a curse, a vast, featureless desert of time to be filled. And so they turned inward. They sought new experiences, new philosophies, new extremes of sensation to give their existence meaning. At first it was benign. New schools of art, deeper meditations into the nature of the cosmos. But the hunger for novelty is an insatiable one. Slowly, subtly, the rot began. The pursuit of beauty became the pursuit of the grotesque. The celebration of pleasure became an obsession with debauchery. Cults of sensation sprang up across their empire, each dedicated to pushing the boundaries of experience further than the last. They explored every facet of emotion, amplified by their own potent psychic abilities. A flicker of joy could be magnified into a soul-searing supernova of ecstasy. A pang of sorrow could be deepened into a luxurious ocean of melancholy. They became connoisseurs of feeling, and their appetites grew ever more jaded, ever more extreme. They were no longer masters of their emotions, but slaves to them. They built theaters of cruelty, indulged in passions that defied the laws of nature, and committed acts of such exquisite depravity that the very fabric of the warp, the psychic sea beneath reality, began to stir in response. They were a glorious, brilliant people, not evil in their intent, but so utterly self-absorbed they failed to see the shadow they were casting upon their own souls and upon the universe itself. And then the bill came due. The psychic energies they had unleashed, the torrent of unchecked hedonism, pride, and decadent obsession poured into the warp for millennia, did not simply dissipate. They coalesced, they festered, they grew, forming a new consciousness in the psychic depths, a nascent god of excess, a vortex of pure, unadulterated sensation. The Aeldari had, through their own self-indulgence, pregnant the universe with their own destroyer. The birth of this god Slaanesh was not a battle. It was a psychic apocalypse. It was a single simultaneous moment of agonizing, ecstatic damnation that consumed the heart of the Aeldari Empire. Across 10,000 worlds, a psychic scream erupted from the warp. It was the shriek of a newborn god and the death cry of 1 trillion souls in perfect, horrifying harmony. It was a wave of pure emotion, a spiritual tsunami that scoured flesh from bone and ripped souls from bodies. Every Aeldari felt it. The psychic sensitivity that had been their greatest gift became the instrument of their execution. Their minds were the conduits for a force so potent it simply unmade them their spirits, dragged screaming into the gullet of the infant deity they had created. In that single instant, the Aeldari Empire ceased to exist. Its worlds were left as silent tombs. Its people were reduced to a handful of scattered survivors on the fringes of the galaxy. And at the epicenter of their former glory reality, itself tore open. The barrier between the material universe and the warp was shattered, creating a permanent wound, a swirling nebula of raw chaos and madness that would come to be known as the Eye of Terror. This was the fall. It was not a defeat, for there was no enemy to fight. It was a suicide. It was the original sin of the Aeldari, a psychic scar that would never heal a tragedy so profound that its echoes would dictate the fate of their children for all the millennia to come. The psychic apocalypse that birthed Slaanesh did not only consume the mortals of the Aeldari race, it sent a shockwave through their pantheon, the divine beings who were both their creators and their reflections. In the immediate horrific aftermath of the fall, as the screams of the dying echoed into eternity, a new and terrible hunt began in the Empyrean. The newborn god, she who thirsts, was a being of singular ravenous appetite, and its first meal would be its own family. One by one, the ancient gods of the Aeldari were hunted, cornered, and devoured by their monstrous sibling. The great hunt was a celestial tragedy. Asurion, the Phoenix King, the greatest of them all, was consumed. Liliath, the Maiden of Dreams, found her visions turned to nightmares before she was annihilated. Moriheg, the ancient crone who held the skeins of fate, saw her own terrible end, but was powerless to prevent it. Aisha, the mother goddess of the harvest and of life, the font of all Aeldari, was not destroyed, but captured, and to this day suffers in the palace of Slaanesh, a plaything for the Prince of Excess, her tears said to be the source of plagues that afflict the galaxy. Even Kyla Mensha Kine, the god of war, a being of incandescent rage and martial fury, could not stand against the nascent entity. He fought as was his nature, and his iron body ran with the blood of demons, but he was overwhelmed. Slaanesh could not destroy him utterly, but shattered his form into 1,000 living fragments that were scattered across the material universe, avatars of war that would later be awoken in times of need. The pantheon was broken. The gods were dead or imprisoned. Despair was absolute. But not all were caught. One was clever enough, quick enough, and perhaps mad enough to see the trap for what it was. One god did not stand and fight, nor did he weep for what was lost. He laughed, and in that laughter he found his salvation. This was Tegorach, the laughing god, the great Harlequin, the trickster. Tegorach was ever the outcast of the pantheon, the unpredictable element. He was not a god of creation, justice, or war. He was a god of artists, dancers, and assassins, a patron of the subtle, the clever, and the deadly. While his brethren held court in celestial palaces, he roamed the hidden paths and secret ways. His great domain, his true home, was the webway, that labyrinthine dimension of interconnected tunnels that existed between reality and the warp. And when Slaanesh was born, shrieking its way into existence, Tegorach was already hidden deep within his realm. He had watched the Eldari's descent into decadence, not with the stern disapproval of a king or the sorrow of a mother, but with the detached amusement of a critic watching a play reach its inevitable tragic conclusion. He saw the punchline coming. His escape was not an act of cowardice, it was a masterstroke of cosmic strategy. To fight Slaanesh was to feed it, to engage it on its own terms of overwhelming emotion and sensation. To rage against it was to give it strength. To despair was to offer it sustenance. Tegorach did none of these things. With a final mocking bow, he slipped into the myriad tunnels of his domain, his presence dissolving into 1,000 different paths, an enigma that the brutish, unsubtle mind of the newborn god could not grasp. He became a ghost in the machine, a whisper in the corridors of reality. He alone had outwitted the ultimate predator, not through strength, but through cunning. He had refused to play the game, and in doing so he had won his own survival. From the safety of his fractured realm, Tegorach laughed. It was not a laugh of joy nor of madness, but of profound and terrible irony. He did not cry for the fall of the Eldari. He laughed at the sublime cosmic stupidity that had led to it, a race that had conquered the stars only to be undone by its own boredom, a people who had achieved physical immortality only to commit spiritual suicide. It was the greatest, cruelest, most perfect joke ever told. His laughter was not a denial of the tragedy, but a full-throated acceptance of it. It was the laughter of a being who understood that in a universe, this absurd, the only sane response was to treat it as the divine comedy it so clearly was. This philosophy became the bedrock of his new purpose. Despair was Slaanesh's victory condition. Hope was a fragile thing easily crushed. But laughter was a weapon. Laughter was defiance. To be able to look upon the absolute, soul-destroying horror of existence, to see your gods dead and your people damned, and to mock it, to turn its own absurdity back upon it, that was a power Slaanesh could not comprehend and could not consume. Tegorach's laughter echoed through the webway, a new song to counter the siren call of she who thirsts. It was a promise not of salvation, but of resilience. It was the assertion that even if the story must end in tears, the performance along the way could be a masterpiece of defiance. He was now the sole remaining truly independent god of a dead race, and his stage was the wreckage of their ambition. The play was about to begin. In the chaotic aftermath of the fall, the survivors of the Eldari were scattered and broken. Most huddled in the cold safety of their craft worlds, vast starships that had escaped the cataclysm, forever mourning what was lost. Others who had become the Drukhari fled into the darkest corners of the webway, seeking to outrun their damnation through ever greater acts of cruelty. But there was a third group. They were not generals, princes, or scientists. They were the keepers of the soul of their culture, the artists, the musicians, the poets, and the dancers. For them, the fall was not just the death of their people, it was the silencing of their song, the shattering of their stage. These were the souls Tegorach sought out. He found them adrift in the hidden tunnels of the webway, their minds fractured by the psychic scream they had endured, their art turned to ashes in their mouths. They had lost everything: their homes, their families, their audience. All that remained to them were the stories, the myths and histories of a people who were no more. They were living libraries of a dead civilization, and they were utterly without purpose. To these lost children, the laughing god did not offer comfort or the promise of a rebuilt paradise. He offered them a new performance. He offered them a role in his great play. He did not teach them how to fight in the conventional sense. He did not give them doctrines of strategy or manuals of arms. He taught them the Sayadath, the great dance, the dance without end. To call it merely a dance is to fundamentally misunderstand its nature. The Sayadath is a language spoken by the body, a historical archive written in movement, and a martial art of breathtaking lethality. It is the core of what it means to be a Harlequin. Tegarak taught these broken artists how to channel their grief, their memory, and their rage into pure symbolic motion. Each gesture, each pirouette, each acrobatic leap became a word, a sentence, a chapter in the epic of the Aeldari. They learned to tell the story of the war in heaven with the flick of a wrist. They could articulate the betrayal of the Satan through the arch of their backs. They reenacted the myth of Cain's shattering and Isha's capture, their bodies becoming living embodiments of the lost gods. And most importantly, they learned to perform the fall, the central defining tragedy of their existence. They did not shy away from the pain. They mastered it, codified it, and turned it into the savage climax of their performance. This act of remembrance was also an act of transformation. The discipline required to master the Sayadath honed their bodies to a peak of physical perfection, making them faster, more agile, and more resilient than any other Aeldari. They ceased to be mere dancers. They became warrior dancers, their art and their ability to kill becoming one and the same. Once they had mastered this new language, Tegarak gave them their sacred duty, their eternal stage. He led them through the most tangled and secret paths of the webway to a place that existed outside of time and space, a fortress of knowledge that had weathered the storm of the fall, the Black Library. It was not a building of stone and mortar, but a psychic construct of impossible architecture, holding the entirety of Aeldari knowledge. Here were the histories of their lost empire, the prophecies of their farseers, the forbidden lore on the nature of chaos, and secrets dark enough to unmake reality. It was the single most important repository of knowledge in the galaxy, the last uncorrupted testament to who the Aeldari had been. Here the first Harlequins swore their eternal vow. They became the guardians, the sentinels of the Black Library. Their purpose was now twofold. In the galaxy at large, they would be the living storytellers, ensuring through their dance that the history of the Aeldari, and especially the lesson of the fall, would never be forgotten. They would perform for craftworlders, for Drukhari, and even for other races, their art a warning, a memory, and a challenge. But their deeper, more secret role was here in the silent halls of this impossible place. They would protect this knowledge from all who would seek to misuse it, whether it be the demons of the warp, the arrogant sorcerers of other races like the Thousand Suns, or even Aeldari who believed some secrets were best left buried. They were no longer the lost survivors of a tragedy. They were the first mask, the children of Tegarak, the Harlequins, and they had found their purpose to dance upon the edge of a blade, preserving the past while fighting for a future they might never see. The Black Library is more than a sanctuary. It is the single most important strategic asset of the Aeldari race, and perhaps the entire galaxy. To call it a library is an act of profound understatement. It is a vault of forbidden truths, a repository of cosmic secrets, and an arsenal of intellectual weapons, so potent they could shatter empires or save them. The Harlequins' vow to protect it is the cornerstone of their existence, for they understand what is truly at stake. Contained within its impossible shifting halls is not just the past, but the key to any possible future. What lies upon its crystalline shelves, it holds, of course, the complete and uncensored history of the Aeldari. Not the sanitized myths told to the young of the craft worlds, but the raw, unfiltered truth of their glory and their obscene descent into the madness that birthed a god. It holds personal accounts from the night of the fall, psychic records of the screams of the dying, a permanent, agonizing testament to their race's ultimate failure. But its contents extend far beyond their own story. The library holds grimoires on the nature of the warp that would drive any Imperial Inquisitor insane. It contains detailed analyses of the great enemy, the true names of ancient demons, the rituals of their summoning, and the methods of their banishment. Here too is the forbidden knowledge of other races. It holds the original sin of the Necrontyr, their pact with the Satan, and the secrets of the biotransference that stole their souls. It contains star charts that map the galaxy as it was 60 million years ago, revealing the locations of dormant tomb worlds and forgotten celestial weapons. It possesses treatises on the terrifying biology of the Tyranid hive mind, collected by doomed farseers in the final moments before their craft worlds were consumed. It even holds texts on humanity charting its savage origins and predicting 1,000 possible futures, most of them ending in fire and ruin. The Black Library is a nexus of prophecy and history, a place where the skeins of fate for all races are gathered and studied. It is not a passive archive. It is a weapon, a shield, and a terrible, lonely burden. For this reason, the Harlequins who guard it are more than simple sentinels. They are wardens of oblivion and hope. Their first duty is to protect the library from those who would plunder it. The forces of chaos are relentless in their desire to possess its secrets. Ahriman, the arch-sorcerer of the Thousand Suns Legion, has spent 10,000 years seeking a path into its halls, believing it holds the key to reversing the curse that turned his brothers to dust. The demon princes of Tzeentch, the Changer of Ways, constantly send probes of trickery and force against its psychic wards, desperate to add its knowledge to their master's domain. The Harlequins fight a silent, eternal war in the hidden corridors of the webway, their blades and wits the only shield between this vital knowledge and those who would use it to set the galaxy ablaze. Yet their second duty is perhaps the more difficult. They must not only protect the library from the outside, but also protect the galaxy from the knowledge held within. For many of the truths in the library are themselves weapons. There are books bound in the flayed skin of psychers that scream when opened, unleashing waves of pure terror. There are scrolls that describe the creation of psychic plagues capable of sterilizing a star system. There are artifacts that, if removed from their stasis fields, could unravel time or draw the attention of entities from beyond the known void. The Harlequins are the curators of this cosmic horror. They must possess a discipline that is absolute, studying the knowledge just enough to understand the nature of the threat, but never so much as to be tempted or corrupted by its power. They are the guardians of a potential salvation that they themselves can never fully wield. They guard the heart of Aeldari hope, but it is a heart that beats with the rhythm of a doomsday clock. To understand what the Harlequins do in the 41st millennium is to understand that they never truly stop performing the Saidath. For them, there is no distinction between the stage and the battlefield, between rehearsal and war. Every conflict is a new scene, every enemy a new audience or a fellow performer in their bloody theater. The Great Dance is not merely a way to remember the past. It is a fluid and lethal doctrine of war, a form of combat so alien and sophisticated that it borders on being a force of nature. It is the art of turning destruction into a masterpiece. A Harlequin battle is a masterclass in sensory warfare. It begins not with a charge, but with an overture of madness. As the mask closes in their hollow suits, the data slates begin their work. The air around them shimmers and warps. A charging orc mob suddenly finds itself running through a field of shrieking phantoms from Aeldari mythology. A disciplined line of Tow fire warriors sees their targeting reticles fill with 1,000 distorted, laughing faces, their comrades appearing as terrifying, monstrous beasts. The Harlequins are not simply camouflaged, they are weaponized illusions, their very presence a virus that inects the enemy's perception of reality. Then the performance itself begins. The Harlequins do not fight silently. Their movements are set to a terrifying rhythm, a symphony of violence composed of the whine of shuriken catapults, the electric crackle of neurodisruptors, and the wet tearing of flesh, from their monomolecular kisses. They flow across the battlefield in choreographed waves, a troop of players moving as one. Their leader, the troop master, directs the flow of battle, not with shouted orders, but with subtle shifts in posture and gesture, each movement a cue for the others to follow. A leap that ends in a decapitation is followed by a somersault that evades a burst of lass fire, which in turn flows into a lunging strike that disembowels a foe. There are no wasted movements. The screams of the dying are not ignored. They are incorporated into the performance, becoming the crescendo of their dreadful song. The goal is not simply to exterminate the enemy, but to do so with such impossible grace and psychological horror that the morale of any survivors is irrevocably shattered. Death at their hands is not just an end. It is a meticulously calculated and exquisitely delivered punchline. Furthermore, each battle is the performance of a specific play, a particular Sayadath chosen for its symbolic and tactical meaning. These are not improvisations, they are the legendary myths of the Aeldari repurposed as battlefield doctrines. When facing the numberless swarms of the Tyranids, a mask might perform the serpent's dance, a fluid, evasive pattern of feints and counterattacks that mimics the style of the god Kain, fighting a many-headed beast designed to break up the cohesion of the swarm and isolate individual creatures for the kill. Against the ironclad legions of Chaos Space Marines, they might choose the Blades of Vol, a performance of surgical strikes against specific weak points, reenacting the legend of the Smith god Vol, creating the Swords of Cain, each blow precise, meaningful, and devastating. Perhaps the most famous and terrible of these is the Fall of the Aeldari. This is not just a dance, it is a psychological weapon of immense power. The Harlequins enact the hubris, the pleasure-seeking, and the ultimate soul-shattering scream of their race's demise. They move with a terrifying ecstasy, their holosuits projecting images of decadent palaces, and then the raw horror of Slaanesh's birth. To witness this is to have the story of damnation seared directly onto your soul. It is a performance so potent it can stun demons and drive mortals to madness. Each mask performs these myths differently with their own unique styles and interpretations, but the purpose is always the same: to turn the legends of their people into a weapon and to make the battlefield their one true stage. Within the grand performance of the Sayadath, every player has their part. While the troopers form the core of the mask, a chorus of lethal dancers, there are specific roles so specialized and so vital that they transcend the ordinary. These are the principal actors, the soloists whose performances can change the course of a battle and define the very character of the play. They are the death jester, the shadowseer, and the solitary, terrifying figure of the solitaire. To understand them is to understand the different facets of the laughing god himself, his morbid humor, his deceptive cunning, and his capacity for ultimate sacrifice. The death jester, the final laugh. Every play needs a critic, and in the theater of the Harlequins, this role is filled by the death jester. They are figures of pure macabre, their armor often adorned with the bones of their predecessors and their masks fixed in a leering, skull-like grin. They are the embodiment of morbid irony, the court jesters of the abattoir. While their comrades engage the enemy in a flowing dance of close-quarters combat, the death jester stands apart, an aloof observer and an artist of bespoke murder. They do not merely kill, they deliver a punchline written in blood and viscera. Their primary tool is the shrieker cannon, a weapon as psychologically devastating as it is physically lethal. It fires a hollow projectile filled with a virulent, bioexplosive compound. The initial impact is often minor, a silent, almost gentle puncture. It is what happens next that defines the death jester's art. A moment later, the compound detonates, causing the victim to violently liquefy and explode from the inside out in a shower of gore. But the true horror is psychic. The compound excites the victim's pain receptors to an impossible degree, tearing a final telepathic scream of pure agony from their soul as they die. This shriek can cause terror and panic in all who hear it, a wave of mortal fear that can break a battle line. The Death Jester is a master of this cruel art, choosing their targets with a connoisseur's eye. They will target the bellowing orc war boss, silencing his wah with a final gurgling pop. They will single out the pompous imperial commissar, turning his speech of courage into a final terrified shriek. They find the inherent absurdity in war and punctuate it with a grotesque and final joke. They are Kegorak's laughter made manifest in its most cynical and cruel form, the Shadowseer, the master of illusion. If the Death Jester is the critic, the Shadowseer is the narrator and stage director. They are the psychic heart of the mask powerful telepaths who weave illusions and manipulate the perceptions of the enemy, shaping the battlefield to fit their chosen narrative. They are the ones who turn a simple patch of ground into a treacherous hallucinatory swamp, or make a small troop of players appear as an army of vengeful gods. Their power is not in the crude force of lightning bolts or fireballs, but in the subtle and complete domination of the enemy's mind. On the battlefield, a Shadowseer is a vortex of confusion. They can implant post-hypnotic suggestions, causing an enemy soldier to turn on his comrades at a key moment. They can erase the Harlequins from the enemy's sight, allowing them to walk unseen through firing lines. Their signature ability is to project a fog of dreams, a psychic miasma that clouds the minds of their foes, filling them with terror, doubt, and visions of their own death. They make the enemy fight not the Harlequins, but the ghosts of their own fears. More than just battlefield controllers, they are the keepers of the mask's lore. They use their telepathic abilities to ensure the meaning of their performance is felt, projecting the heroic saga of a myth into the minds of Eildari allies to inspire them, or searing the story of a traitor's damnation into the psyche of a Chaos Lord to unnerve him. They are the weavers of the tale, ensuring that the great dance is not just seen but truly and terrifyingly understood. The Solitaire, the ultimate tragedy. There is one role within the mask that is set apart from all others, shrouded in awe and a palpable sense of dread. This is the Solitaire. They are not members of any troop. They are alone, as their name suggests, and their path is the most terrible and selfless of all. Even other Harlequins treat them with a mixture of reverence and fear, for the Solitaire has made a pact with damnation itself. In the grand mythology of the Sire Darth, a player is needed for every part, and the Solitaire takes on the most dangerous role of all they play, the part of Slaanesh, the great enemy, she who thirsts. To embody the Prince of pleasure and pain, a Solitaire must walk a knife's edge over a pit of absolute corruption, allowing a sliver of that chaotic essence to inform their performance. This act irrevocably taints their soul. The Laughing God can offer them no protection in the afterlife. When a Solitaire dies, their soul is not gathered into the safety of Kegorak's domain. It is forfeit a guaranteed meal for Slaanesh, a final agonizing payment for the power they wielded in life. This is the unimaginable price they pay. In return for this ultimate sacrifice, they are granted abilities that are truly supernatural. A Solitaire moves with a speed that is impossible to track, a blur of motion that seems to exist in multiple places at once. They can kill a dozen men in the space of a single heartbeat, their blitz a whirlwind of unstoppable death. They are without question the single most deadly warrior the Eildari race can produce. Their presence on the battlefield is a moment of ultimate terror for their enemies and a sign of utter commitment from the Harlequins. They are a living, breathing sacrifice, the embodiment of a tragedy given form, a final, beautiful and damned performance against the dying of the light. The performances of the Harlequins are not random acts of violence or artistry. They are precise, calculated interventions in the grand tapestry of galactic events. To assume the Harlequins merely react to the unfolding drama of the 41st millennium is to fundamentally misunderstand their role. They are not just actors. They are directors, authors, and stagehands working unseen to manipulate the plot. They do not ride the currents of fate. They actively weave them, using the lives of billions as the threads for their design. Their influence is rarely overt, often taking the form of a subtle nudge or a carefully placed catalyst that causes ripples far beyond the initial act. Consider the commander of an imperial crusade, a stern and pious chapter master of the Adeptus Astartes, weighing his options before a critical campaign. His fleet is poised to strike at the heart of an orc empire, a glorious war that will be sung of for centuries. Yet for 3 nights in a row, his sleep is troubled. He dreams not of battle, but of a silent, frost-covered world on the very edge of the sector, a planet of no strategic value. In his dream, he sees a single dying star reflected in a pool of frozen blood, and he hears a whisper in a language he does not understand, a single word that resonates with a feeling of profound duty. He awakens convinced the vision is a sign from the God Emperor himself, a holy imperative he cannot ignore. He redirects his entire crusade fleet, abandoning the war against the orcs, to investigate this barren world. His advisors protest, but his faith is absolute. The fleet arrives to find nothing but ice and silence. The chapter master is confused, his crusade delayed for months. What he never knows is that his fleet's new position this holy vigil cut off a hidden warp route that a Wordbearer's Chaos fleet was planning to use for a surprise attack on a nearby Eldari craft world Saim Han. A single Shadowseer weaving a single targeted dream had diverted an entire Imperial crusade and saved a world all without firing a shot. The humans are left to ponder the Emperor's mysterious ways. The Harlequins simply move on to the next scene. At other times, their methods are more direct, yet no less manipulative. On the industrial world of Vantor III, 2 powerful noble houses were locked in a decades-long Cold War, their private armies bristling with tension. The planet was a powder keg waiting for a spark. Into this simmering conflict arrived the Mask of the Veiled Path. They did not come as warriors, but as entertainers offering to perform for the planetary governor and the assembled nobility as a gesture of goodwill. Their chosen performance was The Sundering of the Sun, an ancient and bloody Eldari myth detailing the feud between 2 divine brothers, one driven by pride, the other by perceived betrayal, a conflict that ends in mutual, tragic destruction. They performed in the Grand Plaza, their movements impossibly graceful, their hollow suits projecting the glory of the gods and the horror of their downfall. The human nobles watched captivated. But the play was a mirror. The proud, arrogant brother was seen as the patriarch of House Rebellion. The cunning, slighted brother was the image of the leader of House Corvus. The performance was so powerful, so perfectly attuned to the political situation, that it bypassed reason and spoke directly to the pride and paranoia of the warring factions. It gave their petty squabble a mythic, epic quality. The day after the Harlequins vanished as silently as they had arrived, a diplomat from House Corvus was assassinated. House Rebellion was blamed. The powder keg ignited. Vantor III descended into a brutal, self-consuming civil war that would last for a generation. The Harlequins had what they wanted. A farseer of Craftworld Ulthway had predicted that a Tyranid splinter fleet would pass through the Vantor system. The Harlequins, by instigating the war, had ensured the planet would be so consumed by its own conflict that its biomass would be churned and its infrastructure ruined, making it a poor and unappealing target for the hive mind. The fleet, seeking richer pastures, would be forced to alter its trajectory, sparing a nearby exodite world that lay in its original path. 1 million human lives were sacrificed in fire and blood to ensure the survival of a few thousand Eldari. For the Harlequins, it was simply a necessary rewriting of the script. While the Harlequins' performances on the worlds of the material galaxy are spectacular and decisive, they are merely the public-facing aspect of their eternal duty. Their true primary battlefield is a place unseen by almost all other races, a secret theater of war where the stakes are nothing less than the soul of the Eldari. This is the Webway, and the war fought within its twisting corridors is a silent, desperate, and unending struggle against the forces that would see the last remnants of their people utterly consumed. To the few outsiders who know of it, the webway is imagined as a network of interstellar highways, a safe and instantaneous mode of transport. This was once true. In the age of the Eldari Empire, the webway was a marvel of psychic engineering, a stable subdimension of smooth, gleaming tunnels and grand plazas that connected their worlds. That age is long dead. The webway of the 41st millennium is a shattered labyrinth, a decaying ghost of its former glory. The fall that created the Eye of Terror also sent psychic shockwaves through this delicate construct, collapsing entire sections, sealing off ancient routes and critically tearing holes in its structure. The webway is no longer a pristine network. It is a ruin filled with dead ends, haunted by forgotten psychic automata and infested with things that have slithered in through the cracks. Worst of all, many of these cracks bleed directly into the realm of chaos, turning entire sections of the Eldari's greatest creation into corridors of hell. It is here that the Harlequins fight their most important war. They are the eternal custodians and patrolmen of this shattered dimension, constantly fighting to stem the tide of demonic incursions. The minions of chaos. Particularly the demons of Slaanesh feel the lure of the webway as a shark smells blood in the water. It is a pathway that could allow them to bypass real space and strike directly at the heart of the craft worlds or Comora, or most terrifyingly, the Black Library itself. The Harlequins are the only things standing in their way. The battles they fight here are surreal nightmares waged in defiance of normal physics. Troops of players dance along walls and ceilings, their acrobatic grace perfectly suited to the bizarre, shifting geometry of the damaged tunnels. They clash with screaming demonettes on bridges of solidified light, their shurikens, and kisses a silent counterpoint to the hypnotic, soul-stealing songs of their foe. Shadowseers weave illusions that turn the already confusing labyrinth into an impossible maze for the demonic legions, while death jesters cause chain reactions of exploding demons in the tight, echoing confines. This is not a war for territory, but a war of purification. Every demon slain is a poison, purged from the veins of their ancestral home. This conflict is deeply personal. For the Harlequins, fighting the servants of Slaanesh is not merely a strategic imperative, it is an act of vengeance and a spiritual crusade. Each demonette they cut down is a part of the god that murdered their ancestors and devoured their pantheon. Each keeper of secrets they banish is a victory against the despair that Slaanesh represents. This is a war fought in the shadows with no witnesses and no accolades. Countless craft worlds and billions of Eldari lives have been saved because a single mask of Harlequins fought to the last dancer to seal a single demonic breach in a forgotten corner of the webway. It is a thankless, eternal, and absolutely vital performance in the great tragic play of their people's survival. In their dance across the galaxy, the Harlequins interact with every major faction, appearing as saviors, omens, or inexplicable aggressors. This has led many to question where their allegiances lie. The answer is as complex and deceptive as the Harlequins themselves. They have no true allies. They have only a purpose. Every other faction, from their own sundered kin to the monolithic imperium of man, is seen not as a friend or foe in the traditional sense, but as a temporary co-star, a prop, or a pawn in a performance whose script is known only to them and their laughing god. Their relationship with the other Eldari factions is the most complex. They are the thread that binds the sundered pieces of their race together. To the Azuriani of the craft worlds, they are revered and feared messengers. A mask will arrive unannounced, performing a myth that serves as a vital warning, or a call to arms that the Farseers had not foreseen. They will fight with breathtaking fury to defend a craft world from destruction, seeing them as precious living vessels of their people's culture. Yet they also grow frustrated with the Asuriani's passivity, their endless deliberation, and their focus on their own survival above all else. The Harlequins see a bigger picture and if a craftworld's caution interferes with the great play, they will not hesitate to manipulate them to feed them a partial prophecy or lead them into a conflict they would otherwise have avoided, all to serve a higher, unseen purpose. Their dealings with the Drukhari of Commorragh are even more pragmatic and chilling. The Harlequins walk the dark, bladed streets of the pirate city with an immunity no other dares claim, for even the decadent Archons know that to harm a child of the laughing god is to invite a fate far worse than any they could devise. The Harlequins view their twisted kin with a profound pity, seeing them as a people who have chosen the wrong path to survival, embracing pain to stave off the thirst of Slaanesh. But pity does not preclude utility. The Drukhari are a weapon fast brutal and utterly without morals, and a weapon should be used. A Shadowseer might subtly leak the location of a vulnerable target to a Kabbalite leader, a newly founded Toll colony, for example. The Drukhari, seeing an opportunity for a spectacular slave raid, will descend in a whirlwind of sadistic violence, leaving the colony a smoking ruin. The Drukhari believe they have acted on their own initiative. In reality, the Harlequins knew the Tau colony was on the verge of a technological breakthrough that would have destabilized the entire sector, drawing the attention of a Necron tomb world. By using the Drukhari's inherent cruelty as a tool, the Harlequins cauterized the threat, sacrificing the few to protect the many, their hands technically clean of the atrocity. Their relationship with the Imperium of Man is one of pure cold calculation. They hold no affection for humanity, whom they generally regard as brutish, superstitious, and short-lived primitives. Yet they recognize the Imperium's immense strategic importance. It is the largest single power in the galaxy, a vast decaying bulwark against the tide of chaos. And a useful bulwark must be maintained. It was the Harlequins, as part of the nascent Inari faction, who were instrumental in the resurrection of the Primarch Robot Guilliman and his subsequent journey back to Terra. They did not do this out of a sudden love for the Adeptus Astartes. They did it because their seers understood that a leaderless, fractured Imperium would collapse into civil war and be swiftly consumed by the forces of the Great Enemy, an event that would accelerate the end of the entire galaxy. They needed the Imperium to remain a significant, if clumsy, player on the board, so they will aid Imperial forces, their dancers appearing from nowhere to turn the tide of a battle against a demonic incursion, but they will just as readily lead those same Imperial forces into a trap, sacrificing a regiment or a fleet to weaken a common foe or achieve a different objective. For the Harlequins, the Imperium is a tool like a large, clumsy hammer. It is useful for smashing things, and they will keep it from breaking until its role in the play is finally over. The Harlequins are not merely manipulators of existing conflicts. They are also catalysts for events of a galactic and even divine magnitude. For 10,000 years, the Aeldari have been a people defined by their past, haunted by a single act of self-damnation. But recently, a new and radical possibility has emerged from the ashes of their grief, the birth of a new god. And at the very heart of this incredible genesis, acting as its guardians, guides, and midwives, have been the Harlequins. This new god is Inead, the Whispering God, the god of the dead. Inead is a nascent entity, formed from the coalescing souls of the Aeldari, who have perished since the fall, a god born not of pleasure and excess, but of death and finality. It represents the greatest and perhaps last hope for the Aeldari race, a power that might one day grow strong enough to challenge and even destroy Slaanesh, their ancient doom. While the Farseers of the craft worlds reacted to the first stirrings of this entity with caution and fear, and the Drukhari with outright hostility, the Harlequins embraced it. They were among the very first to recognize the significance of Inead's awakening, and they have been the most active and zealous agents of its rise. It was Harlequins who guided Ivrain, the future emissary of Inead, through her transformation. It was they who protected her and her first followers, the Inari, from those who would see the new god stifled in its cradle. In a performance of staggering scope, They orchestrated events across the galaxy, from the shadowed alleys of Comorra to the blood-soaked fields of chaos-infested worlds, all to facilitate the rituals and gather the artifacts needed to empower Inead. They brought together disparate figures, Ivrain, the silent champion known as the Visarch, and even the resurrected human Primarch, weaving their fates together to serve the cause of the Whispering God. For a faction that has spent millennia as the preservers of a dead history, this was a radical new role. They had become the architects of a divine future. They were no longer just reenacting the old myths. They were helping to write a new one. But with the Harlequins, nothing is ever as straightforward as it seems. Their zealous support for Inead raises a critical and unsettling question. Is their devotion born of genuine faith? Do they truly believe this new god is the ultimate answer to their people's prayers, the prophesied savior who will end their long tragedy? Or is the birth of Inead simply another grander act in Segorach's own private play? This nascent god, for all its power, is still a pawn on the cosmic board. The Harlequins' actions could be a breathtakingly reckless gambit. Perhaps they see Inead not as a savior, but as the ultimate distraction, a new and powerful piece on the board, whose very presence changes the rules of the game and draws the attention of the great enemy. Or perhaps their goal is even more subtle and cruel. Inead's power grows as more Eldari die and pledge their souls to it. Are the Harlequins merely encouraging a new faith, or are they herding the soul of their entire race into a single psychic vessel for a purpose unknown? It is possible that they see Inead not as the weapon itself, but as the ammunition for a weapon yet to be fired. Their role as midwives to a new god may be genuine, but one must always remember who their master is. For a trickster god, even the hope of salvation can be the setup for the greatest joke of all. So the performance continues, a whirlwind of color and death across 1,000 stages. We have followed the dancers through the ruins of history and into the heart of the present conflict. We have seen the disparate, contradictory, and brilliant pieces of their grand strategy. But what picture do these pieces form when laid side by side? Herein lies the maddening genius of the Harlequins. Their actions, when viewed in isolation, are masterpieces of execution. When viewed together, they form a mosaic of breathtaking and perhaps deliberate contradiction. This is the ultimate question that precedes the final act. What is the purpose of all this sound and fury? What is the final punchline that Hegorach is building towards? Consider the pieces on the board. The Harlequins are first and foremost guardians of the past. They fight and die to protect the Black Library, a monument to a history that is already written, a story that has already ended in tragedy. They are living archives, their every movement a recitation of a lost age. Their sacred duty is to memory, to ensure that what was is never truly forgotten. Yet at the same moment, they are the most radical agents of change in their entire race. They are the midwives to Inead, a new god, a new hope, a new future that threatens to rewrite every rule by which the Eldari have survived for the last 10 millennia. They are simultaneously the anchors to the past and the sails straining toward a revolutionary future. How can both be their true purpose? We see them as weavers of fate, manipulating the vast, clumsy empires of lesser races with the delicate touch of a master puppeteer. A whispered dream here, a staged performance there, sacrificing millions to save thousands, treating entire worlds as mere props to be positioned or removed from the stage as the script demands. Their scale is galactic, their foresight immense. Yet we also see them fighting desperate close-quarters battles in the crumbling corridors of the Webway, a seemingly endless, thankless war against a tide of demons that can never be truly defeated. They are at once grand strategists playing a game of cosmic chess and humble sentinels locked in an eternal attritional struggle. Where is the focus of their war? In the minds of kings and generals, or in the darkness of a forgotten tunnel? All these actions, the preservation of lore, the fighting of endless wars, the manipulation of empires, the birthing of a new god, seem to pull in different directions. It is a strategy of paradoxes. Are they trying to restore the Eldari Empire? Their actions do not point to it. Are they trying to shepherd the galaxy toward a new age of peace? Their methods are drenched in the blood of the innocent. Are they simply agents of chaos, their only goal to stir the pot and enjoy the resulting turmoil? Their discipline and sacrifice would suggest otherwise. As one attempts to connect these scattered pieces to find the single unifying theory that explains everything, a strange sensation emerges. It is the feeling of being watched, of being listened to. It is the feeling that our attempt to understand is itself part of the performance. One can almost picture it, a shadowseer, their face hidden by a mask of inscrutable silver, pausing at the climax of a battle. The chaos of combat freezes for a fraction of a second. The dancer turns their head, their unmoving mask seeming to look directly at you, the observer from beyond the veil of the story. And then a subtle tilt of the head, a gesture that conveys a universe of secret knowledge and cosmic amusement. It is a wink from the jester, a silent acknowledgement that we are trying to solve a puzzle they have intentionally made unsolvable. They know we seek a pattern, and their smile hidden behind the mask, but felt in the very soul, tells us that the mystery is the entire point. The questions remain, but the curtain is now rising on the final act, where the theories for this grand divine comedy will finally be explored. After navigating the labyrinth of their history and the paradox of their actions, we arrive at the threshold of the final question. What is the ultimate goal? What is the punchline to this 10,000-year-long performance? There are no certainties for the Harlequins guard this secret above all others. But by studying their myths and observing their grand strategy, we can formulate the most prominent, the most audacious, and the most tragically beautiful of all theories. This is the theory of the final jest, a plan not merely to fight Slaanesh, not just to survive it, but to trick the god of excess into destroying itself. The foundation of this theory lies in understanding the nature of the prey. Slaanesh, she who thirsts, is a creature of insatiable appetite. It was born from the collective soul stuff of the ancient Eldari, and for millennia it has hunted their descendants, craving their potent souls above all others. This singular hunger is its greatest strength, but it is also its greatest weakness. A perfect bait, Segarak reasons, can lure even a god to its doom. The central pillar of the final jest is the creation of this perfect bait, the entirety of the living Eldari race, their souls gathered together into a single, irresistible, psychic feast. Here the Harlequins' seemingly contradictory actions begin to align into a terrifyingly coherent strategy. Their zealous support for Innead, the god of the dead, is not about creating a rival to fight Slaanesh in a conventional war. Instead, the Inari movement is the perfect tool for the harvest. It provides a theological and practical mechanism for gathering the souls of the Eldari from the craft worlds, from the Drukhari, from the Exodites, into one psychic location under the control of a single entity. Every Eldari who dies and gives their soul to Innead is not being saved, but rather added to the lure. The Harlequins' role as midwives to the new god is, in this light, the role of a farmer fattening up the prize animal for the final slaughter. They are preparing the most exquisite meal ever conceived, a banquet of souls, so potent, so complete, that Slaanesh, a being defined by its inability to resist temptation, will be physically and conceptually incapable of ignoring it. Once the bait is prepared and offered, the trap will be sprung. There are two primary schools of thought on the trap's mechanics. The first posits a physical imprisonment. Tegarash will lure Slaanesh into taking the bait within the confines of the webway, the laughing god's own domain. Here, away from the raw chaos of the warp, where Slaanesh is strongest, the rules are different. The theory suggests that Segarash will sacrifice the webway itself, collapsing its infinite tunnels and sealing its gates to create an inescapable prison around the baited god. Slaanesh would be trapped for eternity in the ruins of the Eldari's greatest creation, a prisoner of the very race it destroyed, a final poetic irony. The second, more subtle theory suggests a metaphysical poison. The gathered souls of the Aeldari, shepherded by Inead and prepared by Segarash, will not be a simple meal. They will be a Trojan horse. In this scenario, the souls are imbued with a psychic toxin, a conceptual virus forged from the essence of the laughing god himself, an idea of pure, mocking defiance and self-negation. When Slaanesh finally consumes its ultimate prize, it will not be nourished. Instead, this psychic bomb will detonate within its divine consciousness. The souls of the Aeldari will become the instruments of a final defiant act of cosmic mockery, crippling the Prince of Pleasure from within, perhaps causing it to fall into a comatose state, or even to be torn apart by the sheer indigestible force of a race that chose to die laughing. But this is where the theory takes its grimdark, tragic turn. This is not a heroic tale with a happy ending. The price of this victory, the very mechanism of the trap, is the willing and total self-annihilation of the Eldari race. To spring this trap, every last Aeldari soul must be part of the bait. There can be no survivors, no one left to celebrate the victory. Their triumph would be their extinction. To finally undo the sin of their ancestors, they must complete the act of racial suicide that began with the fall. And this perhaps is the true essence of the final jest. It is a punchline written in the language of cosmic horror, a victory that is indistinguishable from absolute defeat. A final magnificent performance where the actors must burn down the theater with themselves inside it to kill the one monstrous critic in the audience. It is a strategy of such beautiful tragic irony that only a god who laughs at despair could have conceived it. The theory of the final jest is a tale of epic tragic sacrifice, a perfect punchline to a cosmic joke. But what if the laughing god is not a tragedian, but a pragmatist? What if his goal is not a spectacular final curtain call, but simply to ensure the play can continue indefinitely? This leads us to the second major hypothesis, a theory based not on ultimate victory, but on perpetual cosmic balance. In this version of the play, the Harlequins are not executioners of a grand trap. They are the shepherds of a new galactic cycle. This hypothesis begins with a cynical and perhaps realistic premise: the Chaos Gods cannot be destroyed. They are not creatures of flesh and blood, but sentient manifestations of the collective emotions and thoughts of all mortal races. As long as there is life in the galaxy, there will be ambition, rage, despair, and desire. To seek to truly kill Slaanesh is as futile as trying to kill the concept of excess itself. A god as ancient and clever as Segarash would surely understand this. Therefore, the problem is not Slaanesh's existence, but its unopposed dominion over the fate of the Aeldari. The solution then is not annihilation, but opposition. Under this theory, the birth of Inead is not the creation of a sacrificial lamb, but the deliberate cultivation of a rival power. The Harlequins' true purpose is to elevate the god of the dead to a level of power equal to that of the Prince of Pleasure. Their 10,000-year struggle has been a slow, patient effort to create a new divine equilibrium for their race. They are not trying to erase the tragedy of the fall, they are trying to write a new chapter that balances the cosmic scales. The goal is to forge a new Aeldari pantheon, a grim duality of two mighty gods locked in an eternal struggle for the soul of their people. In this new age, the Aeldari would no longer be a hunted, dying race with a single inevitable doom. Their souls would become contested territory. At the moment of death, their spirit would not be helplessly drawn to the gullet of Slaanesh, but would have a choice, a destination, a powerful shepherd in Inead to claim it. Slaanesh would still exist, its temptations and corrupting influence still a threat, but it would no longer be the sole master of their destiny. The Aeldari would exist in the eye of a divine hurricane, a people defined by the eternal war between the god who birthed their doom and the god born from their deaths. The role of the Harlequins in this new cycle would be that of eternal arbiters. They would not be seeking a final victory for Inead, for the absolute triumph of death is as undesirable as the absolute triumph of excess. their purpose would shift to maintaining the balance. They would continue their dance of manipulation across the galaxy, subtly strengthening Inaead's cause when Slanesh's influence grows too strong, and perhaps even checking the power of the Inari if their funereal dogma becomes too dominant. They would become the guardians of the struggle itself. Their victory is not the end of the war, but the guarantee that the war will never end. They would be the shepherds of a grim but stable new reality for their people, an existence defined not by the fear of a final end, but by the necessity of an eternal fight. We have explored the grand tragic sacrifice and the pragmatic eternal stalemate. Both theories in their own way grant the Harlequins a purpose that is at its core aimed at the survival and continuation of their race. But there exists a third possibility, a hypothesis so steeped in the nihilism of the 41st millennium that it is almost too terrible to contemplate. This is the theory that there is no grand plan for salvation. There is no hope for a new age. There is only the performance itself, a magnificent galaxy-spanning work of art, staged for the eternal amusement of a single spectator, Tegorach himself. This theory reframes the very nature of the laughing god. It posits that he is, in essence, no different from the four great powers of chaos. Like them, he is a god nourished by emotion. But his tastes are far more refined than those of his brutish cousins in the warp. He does not feed on raw rage or simple despair. His sustenance is derived from a far more complex and exquisite vintage, the tragic irony of a beautiful struggle against an inevitable doom. He savors the nobility of a doomed last stand, the flicker of hope just before it is extinguished, the perfect poetic justice of a hero's fatal flaw. For such a connoisseur of tragedy, the slow, agonizing decay of the Eldari race and the galaxy at large is not a problem to be solved. It is the single greatest play ever written, and he would never ever allow it to end. From this chilling perspective, the Harlequins are not the agents of salvation. They are simply the lead actors, the prima ballerinas in their god's private theater. Their incredible skill, their unwavering devotion, their profound sacrifices. These are not means to an end, but the very substance of the art itself. They are the perfect puppets, so dedicated to their roles that they believe they are fighting for a cause, never realizing their only purpose is to make the performance more compelling. Every action they take is reinterpreted in this light. Their manipulation of the other races is not to achieve a strategic goal, but to introduce better plot twists and more interesting characters. Why aid the Imperium to keep a fascinatingly tragic empire of fools on stage for a few more acts? Why serve as midwives to Inaead to introduce a new protagonist, a symbol of hope, whose eventual and inevitable failure will provide a far more satisfyingly ironic climax than a simple, boring slide into oblivion? The Harlequins sow hope not because they believe in it, but because hope, when crushed, makes for the best drama. They are the artists who paint with the blood of empires and write poetry with the screams of the dying, all to elicit a single appreciative nod from their divine audience. In this most grim dark of possibilities, the purpose of the Harlequins is simply to make the slow, agonizing death of the galaxy more beautiful. They are the ultimate nihilists, turning their own extinction and the suffering of all life into a work of performance art. They fight not to win, but to make the losing more spectacular. There is no hidden meaning, no secret plan for victory. There is only the dance, the story, and the laughter of the one God who truly appreciates the joke, that in a meaningless universe, the only thing that matters is the quality of the final performance. In the final analysis of these grand and terrible theories, one figure stands as the key to them all: the solitaire. Their path, their sacrifice, and their certain doom are the purest distillation of the Harlequin ethos. Whatever the true nature of the great play, the solitaire is its most honest and revealing performance, for their fate connects directly to the core of each possible truth. If the final jest is the true goal, then the solitaire is a dress rehearsal for the salvation and extinction of an entire species. They are the test case for the ultimate sacrifice. By taking on the role of Slaanesh, they willingly touch the very damnation their race seeks to destroy, proving that such a terrible burden can be shouldered for the sake of the performance. Their guaranteed destruction is a microcosm of the Eldari's final willing plunge into the abyss to spring Segurak's trap. Each solitaire's life is a single poignant practice run for the death of a race. If the Harlequins are truly the shepherds of a new age, striving for an eternal balance, then the solitaire is the ultimate price of knowledge. To maintain a stalemate with a chaos god, one must understand it intimately. The solitaire, by embodying their nemesis, becomes the ultimate source of intelligence. They are the spy sent on a one-way mission into the heart of the enemy's territory, its very nature. Their soul is the price paid for the insight needed to fight an eternal war, a constant willing sacrifice to ensure the dance of balance can continue. And if the most nihilistic theory is true, that this is all a play for a single divine spectator, then the solitaire is simply the most tragic and therefore most beautiful character. They are the ultimate artist, a being who knowingly and willingly chooses eternal agony, not for a greater good, but for the sheer breathtaking purity of the role. Their existence is the most poignant poem, their battle the most moving dance, their damnation the most sublime climax. They are the living embodiment of suffering made into art, the perfect performance for a god who sees no difference between the two. Regardless of which script is the true one, the solitaire reveals the fundamental philosophy of the Harlequins. They represent the choice made when faced with an unavoidable, horrific fate. One can cower in fear, one can weep in despair, or one can do as the solitaire does, accept the damnation and choose to turn the journey towards it into a final defiant and dazzling performance. They are the living proof that even when victory is impossible and doom is certain, one can still choose the manner of one's end. One can still choose to face the abyss, not with a scream, but with a final, graceful bow. And so we have reached the end of our stage. We have traced the steps of the dance from its birth in the ashes of a fallen paradise to its galaxy-spanning performance in the grim theater of the 40th millennium. We have weighed the theories from the sublime hope of a final victorious sacrifice to the pragmatic reality of an eternal balanced war, to the absolute nihilistic despair of a play with an audience of one. The scattered contradictory pieces of the puzzle have been laid out. We have asked the question in a dozen different ways. What is the Harlequins' true purpose? Now at the final curtain, what is the answer? What is the secret that lies behind the smiling, silent masks? The truth in the uniquely cruel and ironic fashion of this universe is that there likely is no single answer. The truth is that we have been asking the wrong question. We, with our limited linear mortal minds, seek a single grand strategy, a final comprehensible goal. We assume that even a god of trickery must be playing towards one ultimate endgame. But this is the final trick of the laughing god. His genius and the genius of his children is that they are pursuing all of these possibilities and none of them all at once. Segurak is a master of improvisation, a performer who changes the script moment by moment. Is he preparing the Eldari race for the final jest, a self-immolating sacrifice to poison Slaanesh? Almost certainly he holds that option in his hand, a loaded pistol for the final scene. Is he simultaneously cultivating Inead as a balancing power, a rival to create a new eternal cycle of struggle? That too is a brilliant and ongoing performance, a separate play on a different stage that he can switch to if the moment is right. And is he all the while simply relishing the exquisite tragedy of it all, drawing power and amusement from the sheer artistic beauty of his children's doomed, defiant dance? This is not a contradiction. It is the very essence of his being. A true trickster does not have one plan. He has a dozen, and he himself may not know which one he will commit to until the final breathtaking moment. Here then is the answer we have been seeking. The true purpose of the Harlequins is not a destination. It is not victory, it is not balance, it is not even a beautiful death. The purpose is the performance itself. In a galaxy drowning in a sea of dogma, brutality, and despair, the Harlequins have chosen a third impossible path. The way of the Imperium is faith, a blind and stultifying belief in a dead emperor. The way of chaos is submission, the surrender of one's soul for a fleeting taste of power. The way of the tyrannid is consumption. The way of the orc is violence. All are simple, direct, and ultimately traps. Hope in this universe is the surest path to disappointment. Despair is the victory condition of the great enemy. The Harlequins reject this choice. They choose not to hope. They choose not to despair. They choose instead to defy. They have looked upon the face of their doom, the god born from their own sin, and have chosen not to weep or to beg, but to mock it with a final magnificent display of artistry. They fight not to win a war they know is ultimately unwinnable in a conventional sense. They fight to turn their very existence, their struggle, their inevitable end into a work of art so profound and so audacious that it challenges the gods themselves. Their war against chaos is not just about survival. It is an aesthetic rebellion against the crude, ugly nature of damnation. Their manipulation of empires is not just strategy. It is a demonstration of their intellectual and cultural superiority over the clumsy players who clutter their stage. Their protection of the Black Library is not just the guardianship of the past, it is the preservation of the story, the script, without which their performance would have no meaning. They are the living, breathing embodiment of a terrible and beautiful idea that the only true victory in a hopeless struggle is to define the terms of your own defiance. They are the ultimate answer to the grim darkness of the far future. They are the reminder that even when faced with the absolute certainty of extinction, one still has a choice. One can choose to go screaming into the night to be forgotten as another nameless victim. Or you can choose to paint your face, take to the stage and laugh, to dance so beautifully and fight so brilliantly that your final tragic act becomes a legend, to turn your own death into a masterpiece that will echo in eternity, a final defiant jest hurled into the teeth of an uncaring cosmos. The curtain falls. The applause is silent save for the echoes in our own minds. But the play is never truly over. And out there in the cold, silent darkness between the stars, the laughter of the trickster god continues.